Open your ears and lube up your butthole. It's time for the What Do We Call It podcast. Here are your hosts, Jmann and Danny, the Midwest motherfuckers.
I'm going to the ghetto to copy a face. I'm supposed to be well.
Welcome to the What Do We Call It podcast. I'm Jmann.
And I'm Danny.
Welcome to episode 15. And tonight, we figured we'd throw another political stance one at you, and we're going to talk about the death penalty.
That's right.
Both of us are for the death penalty, and in order to research for this episode, I basically sent out a mass text. I wanted some listener feedback, people that I know, and counting Danny and I, total of 15 opinions. We got 14 pro and 1 con.
So a pro being for the death penalty?
Yes. 9 guys, 6 girls, 11 people out of the pool have kids, 4 do not.
I do not.
Right. So what that strongly suggests is that just about everybody with kids is for the death penalty. And I have their answers. So we'll go over those. But 14 to 1 when you're breaking down percentages is 85 to 15, percentage-wise.
Yet somehow Minnesota doesn't have the death penalty.
Well, somehow there's not some federal standard to it. I mean, capital murder cases, yeah, but let's focus on, first me. I have kids. I'm for the death penalty. I've been for the death penalty for a long fucking time. And it's in cases of murder and violent rape and any crime against a child involving a sex crime or violence. I'm for that. And not just like, oh, okay, well, this guy probably beat his kid, let's kill him. No, not like that. I'm more discriminate than that. If there is absolutely no doubt in anyone's mind that this crime was committed by this person, there's witness testimony, there's DNA evidence, there's video or audio, bam, that's the gold standard I go by. There has to be a mountain of evidence to suggest. Yes, I'm very pro-negative population growth. I think there's too many fucking people, but I also work in this industry, so I know how many people are incarcerated. In America, we incarcerate more people than any other country in the planet, percentage-wise.
That's for another podcast, though.
Yeah.
Basically, if the guy's a fuckhead, he's a fuckhead.
So, somebody kills somebody, guy or girl. You know, they kill somebody. You're for it.
Well, it's not that easy, I guess. I mean, if this is just outright, this person killed somebody who did nothing to them, just some innocent person, we'll call him innocent, then yeah, I believe if you kill somebody, if it's somebody just walked up on some random person, shot him, then yeah, death penalty for sure.
So, like, the standard that I'm setting with this is, let's say, crimes in the heat of passion. You walk in, you catch your old lady going to town on some other guy, and you shoot him. You're looking at life in prison by my standard.
You wouldn't want that guy in the category of possibly being given the death penalty?
Well, no, because you walk in and you see your old lady getting fucked by somebody else. Your mind goes completely off kilter. I'm talking absolute murder, premeditated, all right? There's somewhat of an absence of malice in a crime of passion because suddenly you're so overcome by your response to what you're witnessing that normal cause and effect doesn't go through your brain.
Sure.
Just your emotion takes over and you act without thinking.
I don't know, I guess I'd be on the fence with that one, I guess.
If some drunk driver hits a kid on a bike and the kid dies, lock his ass away.
Sure, I can see that.
Don't kill him. If you got some guy that is a sex offender that preys on children, let's torture him and then kill him. This bullshit of no cruel or unusual punishment.
Oh, yeah.
How has that worked out for us?
Yeah, not very well.
All the gun violence, all the sex violence, all the sex crimes, all the gangs, all the narcos. We haven't set a standard that's so unbelievably violent in response that people are still doing. Like, if we had a much stronger benchmark for how we were going to handle criminals of that sort, you got to think it would dissuade people from committing as many crimes. You know,
Sure.
If we took somebody that rapes children or just a guy that rapes women and we cut off his balls on a Thursday, we cut off his dick on a Monday, we cut out his eyes that following Wednesday,
Sure.
and then that next Saturday, you're done, you're dead. You get these liberal pussies who, for lack of a better term, embrace sex offenders with open arms by defending them. You can't execute them, they're human beings, you have to treat them. But if you treat them and then release them back into the community, Are you going to want them working with you? Next door to you? In the stores you frequent? Restaurants you eat at? Probably not. You can't have it both ways. You can't decry a strategy to solve the problem for being too extreme, and then when the people you were just trying to defend are reintegrated, say, I don't want them around me or my family. They're human beings, but you don't want them to be a part of your society. You know, and the worst part about this is you act like they can be treated and fixed without knowledge of what they're about, how they got the way that they are and what they're capable of. You defend their worth. I mean, Jesus, these aren't a bunch of broken appliances. They're human beings that are sexually deviant. They're called sex offenders for a reason, because they like to do things that are deplorable by societal standards, like preying on the innocent, i.e. children. The type of sex they like will always be offensive, because the laws aren't going to become more lenient to protect children less. It's an easy connection. The dots are made to be here. They like offensive sex. Comparatively, I like women, and try as you may to program me to think otherwise, it's what I'm into. It's not going to change due to any amount of psychological conditioning. Some people are into kids, sadism, torture porn, and our nation has collectively decided with our laws and representation that we are not okay with that. So how the fuck are you going to demonize a plan to systematically solve the problem once and for all? You can't treat someone who doesn't view their behavior as problematic, and you can't fight nature. There's a large portion of these Chomo sympathizers that are religious zealots, and that turn the other cheek horse shit's only going to get you so far. What are you going to do when the pervert you forgave for his past crimes rapes again? What if it's you? Are you okay with making yourself and society more vulnerable to victimization because you think your faith system is more important than scientific evidence, public safety, and common sense? Maybe you want to forgive and forget, but society, by and large, does not feel the same way. Because you can't solve a problem like this by thinking with your heart. You have to do it by thinking with your head. That's why logic wins out over human compassion, and they deserve to die for their crimes.
The way our system works now, though, they get caught and they get treatment.
Unbelievable amounts of treatment in Minnesota for the sex offender program.
A lot of money spent on them.
Hundreds of millions of dollars to keep expanding a prison of a program that's been ruled unconstitutional because it's a de facto life sentence. These are people that commit horrible atrocities that nobody really wants them around.
Right.
That's the fucked up thing is, once you've done something like that, society doesn't want you, but we keep them around because it's almost like we're putting on airs about our civility. Like, well, you can't just go killing people. Who are the motherfuckers that are saying that we need to fix these people? All right, talk to Drew Shadeen's mom about Alfonso Rodriguez. He was a level 3 sex offender who, in this state, whether you're ranked level 1, level 2, or level 3, level 1 is like people that have committed a couple crimes. All right, they're going to treat them. Level 2, you've been through a program, you've reoffended. Level 3 is there's beyond a reasonable doubt you're going to offend again. You will offend. It's not an if, it's a when. So Alfonso Rodriguez, level 3, gets out, kills Drew Shadeen. Had that motherfucker been put to death, that girl would still be alive.
So obviously their treatment didn't work for him.
The treatment doesn't work. So we've got, I don't know, like 600 and some offenders locked up in Moose Lake, and the state's got to figure out what the fuck to do with them. And they didn't think of that. They just thought they could lock it away, and the problem would just not have to be dealt with. We're just ostriches with our heads in the sand.
Why don't we use work camps?
They do for some stuff, like up in Duluth and Togo, there's a work camp.
Oh, yeah.
But it's not like, you know, in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, where they work them on the chain gang, or in the movie Life. Like, they don't do that shit anymore because, well, frankly, the crimes have gotten, in my estimation, more violent, more prevalent with the population boom. Back then, if you had a bunch of guys that were in for stealing cars or robbing banks, you work them on the chain gang. That's a far cry from having a bunch of killers all chained together, fucking hoe in a row. So another thing, one of the people said crimes against animals. You know...
It depends on the crime, I guess. I could see that. You got some crazy, stupid fuckers that torture animals because they think it's fun. So if you torture an animal, well, you get X amount of torture. What's wrong?
Let's start taking fingers at that point.
Sure. One per accused incident.
Right. So Michael Vick would have no digits to speak of.
And no football career either.
No football career.
No?
Well, he could be a kicker.
He could be a kicker from Minnesota.
Right. If you're burning down like a kennel and say you kill like 30 dogs, or you burn down a barn and 12 horses die, I don't know if we're going to kill you, but we're definitely going to fuck you up. Maybe we need to set you on fire, and that's your punishment.
Sure. Again, we should get rid of this whole cruel and unusual thing, because that person wasn't worried about being cruel and unusual when they committed the crime.
And I'm very open.
Why should we be worried about it when punishing him for the crime?
Right. I'm very open with my stance on the death penalty, which is not necessarily the smartest thing to do in my line of work, because people start thinking, well, he talks about the death penalty and killing sex offenders. And when you're in the top brass in my line of work, they want you to be completely objective and treat all offenders like they're good people. And, I have the hardest time treating a sex offender like they're a good human being. I had people that molested small children. I had a guy that engaged in a sexual relationship with his stepdaughter, and she wanted it.
Jesus.
Yeah, they fell for each other.
And I'm atheist, and I said Jesus. That's how fucked up that is.
If you don't have experience working with sex offenders like I do, let me tell you something. They're usually very charming people. That's how they get into the good graces of their victims. They're very charming.
That's because not only do they have to get in with their victims, once they get sentenced for these, they have to get along with the other inmates.
Oh, yeah.
And they can't let the other inmates know.
Right. Now, we know how I feel about decriminalizing drugs. I start with marijuana, and Danny's like, well, if you decriminalize all the drugs, after a few years, all the junkies should pretty much peter out because they'll all OD. It's a good thought, so we'll go with that precedent that I decriminalize all drugs as president. And you're going to put the narcos out of business. So we've freed up all this jail space. We've got all these drug offenders that we're finding other means of punishing them other than just instant incarceration plus treatment, because we all know that fucking works.
Right.
Well, you're never going to fucking execute somebody for ripping off money, like white-collar crime. Like maybe Bernie Madoff, because he made off with hundreds of millions of dollars.
And destroyed families.
Oh, yeah. So, you're going to liquidate all of his fucking assets down to everything. And fuck it, his family's going to have to suffer because they were enjoying the fruits of the poisonous tree there that he planted. We do so much to pander to the upper crust in America, like the bailouts of Wall Street. God, that pisses me off. The auto industry bailout, I was not necessarily for it, but when you find out how much they had to pay back, it was more of a loan, whereas with Wall Street, it was like, here, take money so the bank system doesn't collapse.
Sure. Ford didn't take no money.
Now, if you're in the military and you're Bo Bergdahl and you fucking desert, his unit, and people died looking for him, sorry, Bo, you're getting fucking shanghaied. We will hang your ass.
Yeah.
We need to bring back hanging people.
That guy's actually free right now, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a traitor is what he is.
He speaks their language now, though. He learned...
Yeah, Stockholm Syndrome, because he became one of them. He converted to Islam with them.
What's the fucking language called?
Hindi?
Arabic.
Arabic.
He speaks Arabic now.
Okay.
Fluently.
So when I talk about the death penalty, I'm not talking about everything needs to be a horrible death. But I honestly, if you were to realistically try to push the death penalty in this country, I think an easy standard for a lot of people to swallow is one bullet to the back of the head. You kneel them down, you do it gangland style.
People still whine because then they wouldn't be able to have an open casket for their family.
Who fucking cares? They're a criminal.
Yeah, but we got them pantyweights out there.
I can save your open casket thing with a mandatory cremation of the body. There you go. Problem solved.
Yep,
Next.
Stop taking up the space on our earth.
Yeah, I'm totally against burying bodies.
What might be
That's
a good
fucking
way
stupid.
to assess who gets the death penalty? Just make that part of the jury questions. Do you think this crime is fitting for the death penalty? And each juror would have to say yes, no, yes, no. Instead of having them all be
Unanimous,
you go with majority rules. Because obviously you're going to have the bleeding hearts that don't think that's ever allowable.
Right.
But then you're going to have a good mix of people like us who think on it as a case-by-case basis.
Mm-hmm.
Like you gave all these examples, and some of them, obviously no. But then some of them I'm kind of torn on. Like, yeah, I could see it. So if you give each juror an option for yes or no, and then just go with majority rules, I think that'd be a pretty sound way of figuring it out. Because it'd be done case by case. It wouldn't just be, okay, we set a precedent with this guy. Now, everybody who commits a crime kind of like this guy gets the same. It'll be case by case.
Right, it's an intelligent way of executing the plan. Black Lives Matter would have a field day with this issue if it became practice, because they'd say, well, all black people are going to get pressured into tougher proceedings. They're all going to end up getting the death penalty. Well, don't fucking shoot somebody then, asshole. Seems simple enough.
And we all know that their organization's kind of a joke now. Proving it time and time again. I'm all for equality, but they're not doing anything for their cause.
No. So here's the breakdown of what some of these people had to say. Female with kids. Pro. Reasoning, the cost of life imprisonment. It's like $33,000 on average a year to house an inmate, state or federal level. That's fucking ridiculous.
Yeah, fuck
We can do much better things with that money. Like, we could have funded health care. Or we can set the education standard so much better.
Right.
Another female with kids. Pro. They must be proven guilty without a reasonable doubt. Crimes such as rape and murder. fitting the mold of what we've been saying. Male with kids. Pro. Mass shooters and serial killers. The worst of the worst. He's not so into all the rapists getting the death penalty as much as I am. But, murder, he's cool with that. Female with kids. Pro. The cost of incarceration / population concerns. You're always going to win my vote with something as simple as that.
But does she mean population in prison?
No, she means population in general.
Oh.
For her. Another female. Pro. She has kids. The cost versus true justice.
I'm seeing a theme here.
Right. Cost. And pro. Now, what she's saying about true justice is life imprisonment is not enough to satiate the victims' families. And I can totally get on board with that. What I call the death penalty for murderers and sex offenders, I refer to that as true restorative justice.
Yep.
You're restoring balance to the system by eliminating that negativity permanently. I mean, you could try to combat crime, but why don't you try to solve crime too?
Sure.
Next, female, kids, pro, especially in crimes against kids. Now, this person was the one that talked about animals, and I brought that up. And I can kind of see it, but an animal's life is not worth as much as a human's life. Sorry, PETA.
Unless you're a cop dog.
Yes. Yeah, police dogs are
Which is another
the
interesting
same.
thing.
It is.
This last week, I saw on the news a cop shot someone's dog. This dog was not attacking the cop. It's just cop shot the dog for whatever fucking reason.
Did he feel threatened?
It's what I think he ultimately said, but
Yeah.
this dog was chained up and whatever. It's probably just barking at him. And then a couple days later, I seen in the news, massive funeral for cop dog shot.
Oh, yeah.
And then that guy's in prison.
My neighbor had something happen years ago before I moved in. He talked about the cop showed up on a noise complaint, and they went into his backyard, and they drew their guns out because his dog was barking at him. And the cop basically said, and this is hearsay, you need to shut that fucking dog up, because if he comes at me like that, I'm going to put him down.
They're just waiting to pull that fucking trigger.
Sometimes, just like they're waiting to take your shit, like we were talking about last episode, they're waiting to put down your barking-ass dog.
I think we're starting to see a theme in our podcast, too.
Yeah. Yeah, here's a male with kids. Pro, killers get killed, an eye for an eye principle, and the cost of incarceration is a very strong mitigating factor for him. Here's a male, no children. Pro, prisons are overcrowded, but if they weren't so overcrowded, he would be against. So I kind of could tuck him into the maybe category, but he did say pro first. Female, with kids. Pro, crimes against children, and there should be a substantial amount of evidence to prove that they were the committer of the crime, and the appeals process has to be fully exhausted. That's kind of what we have now, and for the most part, people sit on death row forever. Now, sometimes you get somebody who is imprisoned on death row, who decades later is freed through new evidence. More cases than I could ever cover. But the biggest, and I challenge anybody who hasn't actually read about this or heard about this to go out and read about it. Do you know about the West Memphis 3?
Maybe once you start talking about it.
Basically, in the town of West Memphis, 3 young boys were bound and tortured and killed. And they pinned the crime on 3 social outcasts. One who was kind of retarded, who they coerced a confession from. One who had long black hair and lived in a trailer, was a Metallica fan. And another kid who was friends with the Metallica fan. Social outcasts, heavy metal kids in a largely right-wing conservative Bible-thumping community. And law enforcement from the get-go fucked this case up. And Damien Eccles, who was, given the death penalty and sat on death row for 18 years, finally freed. They did multiple HBO documentaries about it, Paradise Lost, 1, 2, and 3. And then finally, once they were freed, after huge amounts of support from everyday people, the law enforcement, criminal justice communities, Hollywood, musicians. I mean, so many people were behind this cause. I can't believe it took 18 years to free this cat. But the best one to watch, I guess, if you want to just get an overall summary, is West of Memphis. It's a documentary. It's fucking great. Here is a male with kids. Pro. We put down a dog for biting a child, but we don't put down child molesters and some killers.
He got that off Facebook. I seen that the other day.
Did
too.
he?
But it's a good point.
It could be. It's Lunchbox from Genre Treason. So, under the bus for you, Lunchbox. But no, I agree with him. It's interesting. Like, I read that. I'm like, you know what? That's a good fucking point. We do put down dangerous dogs for biting children. Why do we put down people who violently harm and sexually assault children?
Actually, I think the way it went on Facebook is we put down dogs for biting children. We should put down the policeman for shooting the dogs or something. Something nice.
That's a little extreme. Here's a male, pro, he has children. He wants something as strong as video and witness testimony, and in crimes such as murder and violent rape, but not like a priest molesting children, which is an interesting precedent that violent rape, where you bind them, you torture them, and you rape the shit out of them.
Well, then they would have to... Wait, what?
He
wants video evidence? Is that what he's saying?
Not for every one of them, but that's the standard he thinks is like, there's video that proves you committed a murder.
The prosecutors would love it if there was fucking video, wouldn't they?
Right, so let's just all wear GoPros, everybody, all the time.
Jesus Christ.
Well, I wasn't expecting to get Mensa-level answers here. These are people just shooting from the hip. So we have to be respectful of their opinions. Kind of. Also, I've known the guy since I was 8. That's 25 years. So.
Has he subscribed to our YouTube channel?
He is.
Okay.
He was the first one. He knows who he is. And as far as the priest with the child molesting, he figures if you do something to a child, you're pretty much worthless. You know, society has no use for you. He didn't really say what to do with them otherwise, but not to kill them.
You know, I think it would be beneficial if we use them for scientific purposes.
Well, that could be.
Test AIDS drugs.
Well, we'd have to give them AIDS.
So?
I'm just saying, you know.
So you have them raped by somebody with AIDS. Give them AIDS. Give them AIDS by raping them. That'd be the first step in their punishment.
You don't just want to give them AIDS via HIV-infected acupuncture needles, which is the way that Suge Knight killed Eazy-E.
Nope.
Google that shit.
You have them raped by somebody with AIDS, right? Give them AIDS. Okay, so there's step 1 of the punishment. Step 2 now is testing the AIDS drugs, which apparently some of them can really fuck you up.
I don't know if I'm down with the raping.
They're rapists, aren't they?
Yeah, but...
Well, so?
Making a kid grab your wiener or suck you off is a far cry from, like, all right, we're going to strap it to the table, and this dude right here is full of AIDS, and he is going to pump your butt so full. He is going to rip you in half, and when you're done, you are going to be so full of AIDS. But teeming with AIDS.
See, now, okay, we'll continue on the path. So now you start testing the AIDS drugs on them, okay? Here's their get-out-of-jail-free card. If we cure them of AIDS, then you're done. Your shit's over.
Would be great, but they'll never cure AIDS.
Well, that's the point, isn't it?
Not because science can't do it, but because they're trying to stop us from curing AIDS.
Right.
I swear they are.
So
that's why there's so many treatments.
Nobody will ever get out of jail free card because they're all going to die of AIDS.
Plus, I said that I thought that we could cure AIDS by rounding up everybody with AIDS and putting them into a couple of rockets and shooting it into the sun. Little extreme, but you know, I'm spitballing that day. Here's another male. No kids. Pro. The cost of incarcerating people is ridiculous. And population, quote, there are way too many fucking people on this planet. I've known him for about 6 or 7 years. And finally, male, no kids. Con, interesting idea. Put them on an island like in the movie No Escape with Ray Liotta.
Well, isn't that kind of how we got Australia?
Yes. Yes, it is.
So,
and now it's a fucking country. How did that shit happen?
Fucking nice people.
What if they build boats? And then they try to come back to the mainland?
So how much... Okay, almost every one of these people said that the cost of holding this inmate was a major issue.
Yeah.
So how much do you think that has to do with the fact that most prisons are private? Most of them are owned by companies. They're not ran or owned by the federal government. How much of that do you think plays in the factor?
Well, the only private prison I could think of that there would have been Appleton, Wisconsin, but that got shut down.
I guess I'm not 100% sure in just Minnesota or whatever, but
that's
there
the only
are
one.
Shitloads of private prisons all over, and that's where most of the United States inmates are being held.
I'm sure they're doing it for much cheaper, and that's how the state switched to that system. It's an interesting concept because when you privatize prisons, then they force them to partake in different industries to produce things to sell to pay for some of their stay. That's a good idea, but the difference being is that I don't know if you want a free market for incarceration.
That's already kind of what we have, though.
I just look at it, it's just like they're slamming the door on people left and right because they think that they're safeguarding society from crime, but they're really not. Because you get like low-level offenders that go in and they get stuck in a pod full of bad dudes, and maybe they make it out of there without getting thumped or raped. Maybe they make a bunch of new friends, and maybe they learn a bunch of shit about being a better criminal.
You should do some research on the privatization of prisons.
We could do that.
And we'll do a whole episode on it.
That's a lot.
It's fuckery. It's high-level fuckery. Just like civil asset forfeiture.
Well, now, circling back to me and having kids, and, you know, I was still for the death penalty in crimes against children before I had kids. I believe I mentioned that in the beginning. But once I had kids, that's like a whole nother fucking mindset you're in, you know, protecting your own. And I've told this to a few people, and I always get a few screwy looks. And I'm like, if somebody does anything to either of my daughters, I'm probably going to maim or kill them. It started off with my oldest. She was about 6 months old, and I don't know why. I just had this moment where she was laying there on my chest, and I just whispered into her ear. I'm like, I promise that if anybody ever hurts you, I will hurt them back. And if anybody ever rapes or molests you, I will fucking kill them. Always trust Daddy to do right by you. Weird thing to whisper into a 6 months.
That's just what any good father would think, though.
Right.
I don't have kids, but I've had.
You've dated someone with kids,
I was a stepdad for 6 years, so those kids were basically. I felt like they were my kids, and I was same thing. I wouldn't hesitate.
It's interesting how all the bleeding hearts are all like, you can't talk like that. You can't hurt people. That's just, you're becoming the same thing that you hate, which is the person who perpetrated the crime against you or your loved one. And it's like, shut the fuck up, you pussy. The second your daughter gets raped, you're going to be screaming for that guy to be castrated like a bull.
Prior to being a stepdad, I was still for the death penalty. I can remember having the debate in 10th grade government class.
I don't think I've ever been a part of any debate in any level of education where it wasn't predominantly people that were for the death penalty. And yeah, you get these little offshoots and splinter groups of people like, well, for this crime and not for that crime, like we were talking. Or
if I think back to the debates in 10th grade, I want to say most of the women were against it. And if there was a dude that was against it, he was against it because he was trying to get with one of the women that were against it.
Or he was on the soccer team. Sorry,
or
we'll say on the tennis team.
Whichever sport's the gayest. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I don't want to say soccer's totally gay, because soccer guys are like totally cutting badass and make tons of money and get so much pussy. Whereas tennis players probably all blow each other.
Yeah.
Well,
you don't want to alienate people.
No, and and the mindset of knowing that the bad people are out there and will do things to kids was instilled in our generation very early, especially home with Jacob Wetterling getting snatched.
Right.
That was almost 30 fucking years ago.
Yeah, I can vaguely remember it because I was really fucking little when that happened.
Yeah, you were about 7.
But
I was
all
about
growing
9.
up, whatever in school, whenever we would talk about, don't talk to strangers, blah, 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 Jacob Wetterling was always brought up.
That's the
We've heard the
precedent.
story hundreds of times.
So, I mean, if for some reason someone in another state is listening to this, I think we got a few possible listeners from other podcasts following our Twitter. Check it out. If you don't know the Jacob Wetterling story, you're missing out on probably one of the top 5 most famous kidnapping stories in the history of this country.
And it's still an ongoing investigation. Just a couple months ago, I wanted to say they were digging up somebody's yard. Or was that last year?
Last year they dug up a neighbor's yard, and then this year they arrested a sex offender who they thought could possibly be linked to it. So, I mean, they're still grasping at straws, chasing down leads. I mean, that's going to be one mystery that if it ever gets solved in our lifetime, will be fucking amazing.
I even remember seeing a Unsolved Mysteries episode on it.
Oh, yeah.
That freaked me the fuck out, I think.
So, like we've said, we're pro-death penalty. Odds are you are too. I don't know who these fucking pussy-ass politicians are that like to pretend that we as a nation need to be kinder and gentler to violent criminals and sex offenders. Can we just stop fucking acting like we care about them? Once you alienate your place in society, we're done with you. Why would we keep you around? What's the fucking use?
I bet you if you look at those politicians, follow the dollars.
Oh, yeah.
I bet you they're for keeping them alive because they're making money from keeping them alive.
It's an interesting thought.
Again, it comes in with the privatization of these prisons.
Very
You'll
true.
make a connection if you look this stuff up.
And then you got to think of people that commit heinous crimes that have tons of money to afford the best legal representation to get out of it.
Or just
OJ. And then they've got asylum somewhere else, like Venezuela or some other shitty country. It's just, we need to come up with better ways of dealing with criminal justice in America. Because what we've got going on right now, the status quo isn't working. It's not. An overpopulation is killing us, and the cost of incarcerating these individuals is bankrupting us. That's why, as your president, it would be such a drastic turn of the ship. We're talking a hard right. Not like I'm talking conservative GOP politics here, but a hard right to take a look and say, hey, let's fucking change it up. Because if I go hard left, I guess let's give them all hugs and puppies.
That's what we're doing now.
That's what we're doing now. So it's kind of a short episode. I just kind of threw it at him on the fly.
Yeah, it worked out though. That was a good episode.
I think so.
This is a good time to bring up, join us on Facebook. You want to tell them the address for that?
Facebook.com/groups/what-do-we-call-it-podcast.
And then if you search What Do We Call It Podcast in either Spreaker or Podomatic, YouTube, and Twitter, follow us, subscribe to us, all that.
Show us the love. I'm going to throw out a last second Brotherhood 2000 plus 16.
Word.
We love our other 93X listening brethren and sisters.
Hey, let's do this too. If you're listening and you listen to 93X, so you happen to be from Minnesota, text in, tell them to give, what do we call it, podcast, a shout out.
I would love some more shout outs. Word of mouth is the only way this is going to get. I'm not trying to get rich off of this. I get my jollies off of entertaining people. And it would be fun just to have an extensive community of listeners to interact with, because the more people that listen, the more people that we get in touch with, because we firmly believe in interacting with the audience, the better the show is going to be. You'll get to hear your ideas and thoughts. It'll help us have better fleshed out ideas for the show. So signing off for the What Do We Call It podcast, I'm Jmann.
I'm Danny.
That's the end.